Hi, welcome to episode 14 of the American Tributaries podcast, where, to break out of the bubbles we've all been living in these last few years, we are using modern technology to explore the various currents of people in our great country, kind of like a 21st century Lewis and Clark journey. I'm your host, Michael Whidden, and thank you for joining me in this exploration of America. If you enjoy listening to the podcast, please be sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to or watching. Go ahead, give us a like, thumbs up, a heart, and check us out on Instagram at American Tributaries. I'm really excited today to be joined by Ben Bohen. Ben and I have been good friends. We've worked together for maybe the last 10 years or so while I was in the wine trade. And while we'll talk about wine here, I want to talk to Ben about a different thing. And I think this is more like the exploration part of what the podcast is trying to do. I want to talk to Ben about his life as a small business owner, because I'd say after the 12 years of working in the wine trade, Ben was far and away among the very best at doing what he does. And he owns a great wine shop called Waterfront Wines, which is near my home, and it's on the Brooklyn Bridge Park waterfront near Pier 5. And from the outside looking in, I could see that Ben really, I think, did what he did. I knew there was a lot of work behind the scene, but it always seemed effortless, which is certainly a grace and poise I don't have. But there are many different ways of noticing how good he was at what he did. He had always had a good inventory for any kind of customer that came in. It was constantly changing, but always reliable, I think, to what people needed. You could see his customers would walk into the shop and it seemed like it was an extension of their homes. I know that Ben, in the first year had to kind of overcome some major challenges, and even the last few years has also had to do the same thing. And the last thing I think is, Ben would have employees that stayed for a long time, and when they left, they would leave, I think, with his blessing and moving on to even more exciting things. So I thought, Ben could really talk about, again, his life as a small business owner, and I think small businesses are something that kind of can sometimes fall into the white noise of the background as we walk around, our communities, but they really are the lifeblood of the communities and are so essential to our economy, especially in this day and age when it's so easy to click and order. I think it's far more important to get to know the people that have actually committed themselves physically to their communities and are actual, human beings to be there, help you, talk with you, and give you the relationships that I think we all kind of need as human beings. So, Ben, apologize for the long-winded introduction, but thanks so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
You're welcome. Thank you for the kind words. It's very flattering. I'm well. It's a beautiful day here on the waterfront, which is always good for the spirits and good for business.
Yeah, for sure. How long have you had the wine shop?
We opened the store in November of 2011. So it's been about 10 and a half years now.
And I think you often hear, I think, people talk about owning small businesses or thinking they could start something, and I'm sure, but most people also know it is challenging, but have no idea of how challenging it is. So what was it like starting your business? We can go backwards and forwards in time, but just
Sure.
kind of what's that like when you decide, what was the process of you deciding that you wanted to start a business and then making that actually happen?
Well, before I worked in wine retail, I worked in restaurants for many years. I sometimes sort of tell people I'm a professional foodie, and I happen to be in the wine stage of my career because I worked for many years in restaurant management. I was drawn into that by love of both food and of the dining experience. Gathering people together to mark an occasion or even just, celebrate the everyday. And along the way, wine sort of became a bigger and bigger interest for me as it goes, hand in hand with food. I also, always had something of the entrepreneurial bug about me. I wanted to start my own business for many years. My original plan was to start a restaurant, but after many years of running other people's restaurants, there were just, various things about operating a restaurant and the lifestyle that came with that that didn't really appeal to me so much. On the operational side, there's certainly, many, many moving parts and many, many variables in the restaurant industry that are difficult to control and therefore bring a lot of stress with them. There are also hungry customers who sometimes are not always so easy to please in the moment. And so along the way, it occurred to me that I could, turn my passion for wine and kind of, or turn to that and combine it with my entrepreneurial interests and ambitions, and run a retail business, which is a much more controllable, low stress environment, both operationally and in terms of customer service. I was lucky enough to have three friends at that time were, also interested in being part of opening a business. So it was really a team conception and a team effort to get the business open. I think it's a really interesting question on your part. It makes sense chronologically, right, to start talking about how we opened in terms of the history of the business. But I think it's also something that a lot of people don't really think about when they're making their business plan or deciding to open a business. And I often tell people when they come to me and ask me about their plans for opening a business that opening is an entirely different process and presents an entirely different set of challenges to actually running a business. And normally when people want to open a small business, it's because they have a passion for something, wine or, fitness. They want to open a yoga studio or a running store or, food, and they want to open a restaurant, et cetera, et cetera. But in order to get the doors of the business open and the business up and running so that you can, turn that passion into product or revenue, there's a whole set of things that you need to do that you're only ever going to do once or maybe twice, and that are completely unrelated to whatever that passion is. So, for example, you have to find a space and negotiate a lease. Once you have that lease, you're hopefully never going to have to look at it again. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to deal with designers and contractors to lay out the space and design it in such a way that's both, appealing to your customers, but also functional, which, are two entirely different things. You're going to need to become an IT person because no business today comes without, computers that keep inventory and track sales. You're probably going to need to have a website. You're going to need to have multiple phone lines. All of these things that in our day-to-day life we don't necessarily deal with. And, even if you're going to open a restaurant and you've gone to culinary school, there weren't any classes in that, how to make your kitchen printer work when the order is entered, or, how to take your inventory of wine. You can be a great sommelier and know all about wine, but have no idea how to, put in place all the tools you'll need to run your wine store.
So the grunt work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those challenges can be very stressful, and, they often take a lot longer than people think. From the time we decided to open this business and sort of worked out a business plan to opening the doors, was at least 2 years. Wow. We had to find the space. Once we found the space, it took a very long time to negotiate our lease. We had to get a liquor license. And only after all of that could we actually risk putting in the money to building out the space and starting to order the wines and really getting ready to open the doors.
And what was it like on that first day? You show up and you open the door. Like, is there terror? Is it totally calm because you feel like you kind of already accomplished a lot? I mean, what was it like?
Both, I would say. Well, I wouldn't say there was a sense of calm. There was definitely it's definitely a moment full of anxiety. Sure, there's a sense of accomplishment at how far you've gotten, and a sort of sense of relief that so many of those processes that I was just describing that have nothing really to do with, you know, the wine you want to sell or the great customer service you want to provide. But of course, at the same time, you worry about what's going to happen if not enough people walk through the door. And, I still have that fear, some days now, 11 and a half years later. I think, when you have a retail business, no matter how successful it might be, you always worry that, you know, a day might come when you don't have enough customers. Um, it was also dark here in the store that day, literally physically dark, because close to the day we were ready to open the doors, Con Edison took issue with the way our electric meter had been installed and turned off our electricity. So,
Wow.
fortunately, our store allows us access to the lobby of the residential building that the store is located in. So we were able to run a couple of heavy duty extension cords out into the lobby and plug them in. And we ran over to IKEA and, bought 6 or 7 of the least expensive floor lamps that we could find and strategically placed them around the store with a whole network of other extension cords. And, we're able to get the door open. The funny thing was,
Exactly as you scripted it for opening day.
right, exactly. I mean, that's one of those things with the opening process. The challenges it provide, it throws your way, do sort of prepare you for what it's going to be like to run a business. In that, you really never know when you're running a small business what each day is going to bring and what new challenge or obstacle might come your way. And those kinds of things that we had to deal with when we were getting open, certainly helped prepare me for the journey that I've been on the last 11 years.
And
The
at
funny
what
thing
point?
was as well,
Well,
another lesson there is that, you're you're sort of, I would say, I don't want to say your own worst enemy, but perhaps, your own worst perfectionist would be a better word for it, because, we were all very concerned about the lighting situation and that, maybe the store would be too dark and it wouldn't be appealing to people, or, people wouldn't be able to see the labels of the wines. But I don't think in those couple of weeks between opening and when, Con Edison finally turned on our official power, anyone really noticed. People just showed up and, enjoyed the selection that we were offering and the look of the store. And, from the outside looking in, it was all, perfectly normal. It didn't appear as if there was any issue at all. And I think, you know, when you say sometimes from your perspective, it looks like what we're doing here is easy. I think part of that sense of ease for me comes from that awareness that, I can be doing, or meeting, 75 or 80 or 90% of my goals for myself and the business that day. What some days 100, although those days are few and far between. But however well I'm doing, it if the customers are happy, that's what's important. And usually they are. If you set your goals and expectations high, and you strive to meet them, you're usually going to find that you're pleasing your customers.
It's interesting. It's almost like a like a macro and micro situation. Like you can, I think there are times in my life where maybe you feel particularly frustrated and you blame macro things beyond your control, and if you step back, you realize like you have control with the micro, more than you think. And here you're responsible for both the macro and the micro. So you do the best you can, but at some point you've got to forget about it and then just zero in on, there's a customer here looking for a bottle of wine. I can't be consumed with anger that this isn't exactly the setting that I wanted it to be, or we don't have exactly the wine that we were supposed to have.
Right. Exactly. And you just find again and again when you're dealing with the public, and not just the public, but dealing with people, being in a business in which I deal with, dozens and dozens of people every day, uh, you know, makes me a lot calmer, and just I feel more placid and more understanding in out in the world in general, because you come to realize when this is your job that that energy you put out is most of the time the energy that's going to come back to you, and if you try to stay calm and understanding and listen to people and understand where they are coming from, you're going to get that same energy and sort of respect back from them.
The thing that what I found after 12 years in the wine trade, and didn't really get to sell like you do on the floor, but just doing in-store tastings and just kind of interacting with customers, is I think that it's easy to overlook how challenging it is. And I don't mean like challenging like it's an insurmountable challenge, but it feels like in retail, and in wine retail especially, you're walking a very fine line, because you have customers that come in, and I guess for your regulars it's less so, but for for any successful business, you always have to be making new relationships, right? And when somebody walks in that you don't know, there's a lot of touchy subjects that are tied to wine, right? I mean, how much are they looking? So you're talking, if how much are they going to spend touches upon their finances. When you're talking about the areas where the wine's from, you're touching upon their how much they've traveled or how little they've traveled. When you're asking who it's for, is it for, or maybe it's for a relationship that's touchy. So there's a lot, I think, that's going on under the discussions that I think you would have on the floor with people. I don't. Is that the case? And then, like, if so, do you how do you prepare your people to be able to have those, positive engagements with everybody that walks in?
Right. I think it definitely is true that people walk in with all sorts of different expectations, agendas, needs, things that they're looking for. They can range from very casual. I'm just looking for a simple bottle of wine to have a glass of wine an hour from now, and I know what I like, and there's no pressure at all, to I'm meeting my fiance's parents for the first time, and I need a really nice bottle to impress them. And that's an interaction that's fraught with anxiety. I think that what's important, well, first of all, that that's one of the fun things about what we do, is those constant pivots, and meeting people where they are in so many different ways. I think the approach I try to take, and I try to sort of teach my staff by example, more than by dogma. It's sort of hard to explain some of these things, but when you're actually sort of working with people and doing it over and over again, it sort of becomes a practice. But sort of doing simple things to sort of meet and greet each person and put them at their ease. I mean, we try to say hello to every single person who walks in the store. And I think right off the bat, even if whether it's a quick grab and go, or whether it's going to be a long interaction, that right there, puts people at their ease, lets them know, there's someone here who's acknowledging their presence, who can talk to them. Just little things like that, eye contact, a smile, I think make a huge difference in any interaction. And I think being sort of polite but direct, like you bring up the question of price point, right? And it's really, we have bottles in the store that range from $8 to $200, and it's really impossible to recommend a wine to someone without getting some understanding from them of what they're interested in spending, which can be different on different days or for different occasions. And so, we simply ask people when they're looking for recommendations, what sort of price range they want to be in. And that is typically one of the first questions we ask. And I think that right there, which isn't always a question people get, puts them at ease and lets them know that, they can be open about whatever it is they're looking for. They can ask whatever questions they want, that, this is a place that we're going to meet, their needs.
Yeah. I always find like what I tell people, because I know that it's easy to get worried about the pricing, but I talk to people about like, when you're shopping, think about average cost instead of like having a ceiling. Because I think people are conscious like, well, if I buy something cheap, then they're going to think this of me. And if I have to buy something expensive, then like whatever. And I always say like, tell people like, everybody loves a good bottle of $30 wine or whatever, however you treat yourself. But I think what's even better is a great bottle of a great bottle of $12 wine. Like if you find the bargains, that, I mean, for any, I think, true wine lover, that's just as pleasing. And I think to talk about like being a foodie, I always think like you're not a foodie if you go to just like, Michelin star restaurants. Like the foodie is the one who's got the favorite like dive places or the favorite street food places. Like that's the mark of somebody who really loves the subject matter, not just one where you're chasing some kind of reinforcement of status or knowledge or access or something like that.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, what I always tell people is, we try to find the best wines we can at every price point. And I think, that also helps to win regulars, when they are looking for that $12 or $13 bottle. And, we really take the time to help them, whether, they need a food pairing or are having a party or giving it as a gift, whatever it is. The fact that, we treat those choices with all of the seriousness and attention that, we treat someone who's looking for a $50 bottle or a $100 bottle, I think, really helps us to win some loyalty.
Yeah. And I think for anybody listening, I can assure you at least that any wine that shows up on the Waterfront Wines shelves has gone through a wicket of like qualifications in terms of like,
right.
You taste a lot. You're not just
right. You speak from experience. You
yes.
have many wines that you sold us, and probably just as many, if not more, that did not make it onto the shelf. So
yes, yeah. So I can definitely testify to that.
So Michael, I hate to interrupt, but there is a guy at delivery guy at the door with a few cases. Can I let him in or?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. This is the life of a small business owner,
okay.
Everyone.
Right. Exactly.
So, I guess just to kind of keep the dialogue going, the thing that I've done a few different in-store tastings with Ben at the Waterfront, and I think what was always fun is, I guess, introducing people to new regions, new kinds of wines, and I always felt like the key to that was one, I guess, have them having comfort when they walked into Ben's store, because I think there's an element of trust, and I think that in the wine world, inside in the trade, people like to use points when it helps sell wine, but I think there's a certain level of resentment because when you use points to sell wines and you love your product, people discount your opinion to just look at what point scores are, and point scores are really just one person, one publication's opinion, and frankly, you know nothing about them. For a place like Ben's store, I think I can assure you that Ben is paying attention to the wines. And like I said, and from my viewpoint, there were many, many more wines that Ben rejected than brought in. So that's the mark of somebody who's really kind of paying attention to the quality of the products he puts on his shelf. So what I'd say to anybody is, if you walk into a wine shop and you know nothing about them and you have no idea whether you trust them, then you should certainly look 2 points. And if that's just something you want to do because you want to make your life easier, that's fine as well. Because it doesn't, buying wine doesn't have to be a geeky thing or something that has to be, introspective or whatever. However, if you are curious about wine, and the wine world is so vastly fascinating, try to find wine shops where you can trust them. And then once you find somebody like a Ben and you can trust them, you really can just walk in and just say, I'm looking for a wine around $20. I've had lots of California Pinot Noirs. I'm tired of them. I want something different, or I like it, but I want to see how they make Pinot Noir in Oregon or in, France or in, wherever, New Zealand, anything like that. So I think that to me is the key with Ben, and I think really with almost any, I think, successful small business, is that there's an attention to quality that and then mindfulness and purpose that I think really marks the great small businesses, at least from what I've seen. So Ben, thanks for joining for rejoining.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's okay. So I was just talking about point scores and saying how I think I understand their utility for a lot of people, especially when you're in a random city and you need to just grab a bottle of wine and
Sure.
you don't know the wine shop and you really don't care to do any major research. Sure, look at points, but I think that you're always better served if you can find a shop where you trust the people that are there and you can just ask them, anything. And I'm sure it's easier for you, but I think it's just a lot more exciting because then you're not limited to anything and you can kind of go down the trail of different kinds of wines, or even the same kind of wine but different versions of it or something.
Right.
So
advice I would give as well is to the consumer is to be specific. I mean, it's one thing if you're going to a shop that you're familiar with and where you're a regular and you share their taste. But if you walk into a place that's new to you, their focus might be different from yours.
Yeah.
You might like more California wines, for example. This might be a store that specializes in European wines. But if you let them know, this is what I usually like, or this is what I don't like, it helps the people you're talking to understand, what you're after and to match you with the right wine. I think sometimes people are a little bit intimidated when they go into a wine store because they feel like they don't know how to talk about the wine. But I think, everybody has things they like and don't like, and whatever language you use to communicate them, it's the job of the people at the store to then internalize that and match you with something that they have to offer.
Yeah. And I think there's there's definitely, I think, I think in the bigger picture, like obviously this podcast is about breaking out of bubbles and stuff. And I think like in the wine world, there is certainly a bubble as well. So that I can see sometimes there's a certain level of impatience that might arise with anybody in the trade where it's like this person's so basic or they're asking for something that's so basic. But I always try to, I guess, humble myself by thinking about like how I look at ordering coffee. Like I order coffee. The most important thing is that it's not offensive and that it's got caffeine in it. And my only tasting note that I know of is I like the coffees that are chocolatey. So I think that if for anybody, like if you like wine or whatever product you're looking for, you shouldn't be afraid of kind of revealing like what it is you do know or don't know. And shame on the person taking care of you if they make you feel like you are, something, that you're ignorant or that you're not good enough for them to deal with you. Like, I think if you ever get that feeling, you should just turn around and walk out of wherever you are for whatever product you're looking to buy.
Absolutely. I agree. That sort of service makes no sense to me. I mean, one of the things that's sort of challenging in this business is that, you know, the more you explore and learn about wine as a wine professional, sort of the more of a specialist you become. And, you know, there are certainly many examples of wines that are very popular and sell very well to the general public that are, you know, not sort of in favor or in fashion with, you know, within the wine industry. And I think that's, you know, probably going to be true in any sort of business, you know, where you're a specialist and, you know, you're selling these a whole array of unique products to the public. But to me, you know, one of the things that's appealing about becoming a specialist in anything, right, is sharing your knowledge with people who don't know as much as you do. You know, you don't become a specialist. I mean, well, maybe if you're a particle physicist, you become a particle physicist to share your knowledge with other scientists and, you know, make discoveries. But even then, you're at some level, you're doing that to benefit all of society, even if you don't, you know, have 100 people walking into your lab every day that you have to explain things to in layperson's terms. But point being, you know, people who accumulate knowledge and then are, you know, sort of resentful about having to share it, or resentful because someone with less knowledge doesn't, you know, share their tastes, make no sense to me. It's outrageous.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that, you know, we all were, you know, were at one point didn't know what we know now, and I think that was always something I tried to remind myself. Like, I remember when I didn't know if Rioja was a grape, a region, you know, like they're just basic things that we you start to know in any subject area, but you know, and you forget about how at some point you didn't know it. So it's a learning curve, and I think that, you know, in terms of, like, I think people and their learning and the transformation and evolution of their tastes, I find that working in the wine trade was very informative to me in terms of understanding political discourse. I don't necessarily try to talk politics here, but in terms of like human interactions,
Right.
you know, you find that, like, if somebody walks in and they like an $8 bottle of Chardonnay, they may never move from that $8 bottle of Chardonnay, which is not really that significant in the grand scheme of things, right?
Right.
And the evolution from that $8 bottle of Chardonnay to, you know, a $20 or $30 bottle of Chablis might take years to get them to slowly kind of reconsider things. So I think when you're looking at opinions about things and beliefs about things, it takes time. There's no, it's if in wine it can take forever to get somebody to you know, change their mind. It's certainly going to be, you need patience in trying to transform minds on more serious things as well.
Sure. And I think, you know, with customers here, you know, many people, if not most people, you know, are never going to look to learn everything that the people who work here know. You
Right.
know, that wine just isn't the same priority for them as it is for us. But, you know, they're coming here to gain, you know, some piece of knowledge, or, you know, to bite off something that we know because it's going to be helpful to them. They feel like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they're going to have a better bottle of wine and a better experience with it, because they've availed themselves of our knowledge. And so, you know, even if that just means giving them, you know, one little bit of information that they didn't have when they walked in, and that's, you know, all the knowledge they're ever going to want about the wine, um, that's still something, you know, that's still a meaningful interaction and a meaningful exchange of information and ideas.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, you know, everything all the time to be meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I see some pink boxes behind you. Is that something? Is that something new? And I guess more generally, like what's? I look like it's pink, so it looks like it's. I
Right.
imagine it's rosé.
Right. So it's
What is
rosé,
that?
right? If it comes in a pink box, it must be rosé. Uh, that's from a producer called Rezabal, and it's a rosé. Well, it's from Spain, so although it does say rosé on the side because they know it's being exported to the United States, but properly speaking, it would be called a rosado, which is the Spanish word for rosé, which is the French word. And specifically, it's rosado of Chocolate, which comes from the Basque region of Spain. And it's marked by sort of a natural effervescence. All the wines from this area um, sort of share that stylistic hallmark. And it's, actually quite popular. It was something, 10, 20 years ago. No one in the US had heard of. These were wines that were not exported. They were produced and consumed locally in that part of Spain for centuries. And, now they've been shared with the world, and people come and ask for them on a fairly regular basis. And, that's definitely one of the appeals of working in wine is that, wine offers an entry point into so many different local and regional cultures around the world. And, you know, from the outside, you might think, oh, there's French wine, Italian wine, American wine. But, the deeper you dive into the world of wine, uh, the smaller and smaller the regions and specialties that you discover are. And that, is one of the things just so fascinating about it. It's there's a whole diverse sort of mosaic of regional styles and varieties from so many places around the world.
Yeah, I visited a Basque wine grower in France, and what I found interesting when I went to his like tasting room was that the map he had of his wine region wasn't like about France; it was about the Basque region. So it had like it really covered probably more Spanish than French.
Sure. Yeah, there's
Um,
many regions like that where a wine region or tradition or set of practices or grapes grown straddle the borders of or the modern borders of two countries. I sometimes say, uh, the grapes don't know about the lines on the map. you know they
right.
grow they grow where they will grow and where people have uh, tended them and cherished them and used them to make wine for typically many centuries.
So, as a consumer, for I guess, how, I mean, for your opinion, like, how do you tell the difference between something that's trendy versus something that's transformational? Like, for instance, like the rosé and chocolate rosé, I think, is that's the transformation of the wine offerings in the wine world made rosé much more prevalent and went far beyond Provence rosé. But in general, for you, as somebody who's like buying wines from distributors and importers, you have to be a smart shopper. So at some points you don't actually want to buy into a trend, or maybe you do, but being on the cutting edge of a transformation is probably beneficial for you just to kind of be known as somebody who's seeing those changes. So how do you distinguish between the two, if you even care at all? Maybe you don't.
Right. That's an interesting question. um, I, I I would say when I look at you know different categories of wine, uh, there are fashions, as I was saying, things that come and go and ebb and flow. And then, as you say, there are more transformational trends and, things that are here to stay. I think rosé is certainly one of them. The production and popularity of rosé in the United States and, worldwide has been exponential in the last 30 years. It's gone from being, uh, something of a regional specialty to something that is produced and consumed in every, corner of the world, or produced in every winemaking corner of the world and consumed, everywhere else on top of those. Um, I think I look for sort of diversity of styles and options if I'm thinking about something that's transformational. You see that with rosé. Uh, you know, 25 years ago, all we knew about was, the rosés of Provence, at least all we knew about here. Now we've discovered unique rosés from a variety of regions, the Chocolate, or uh, from every corner of Italy, that utilize, different grapes, have different degrees of body and alcohol, tannins, and even from California now, there's a whole huge array of different rosés. I think that sort of diversity points to a category that's here to stay. There's winemakers engaged in it from all over, producing all different styles, and there's consumers now for all of those different styles. We see, something similar with sparkling wines, which have become more and more popular. It used to just be champagne, and then Prosecco came along, but now we have, cava from Spain. We have, funky pet nats, all sort of varieties of Cremants sparkling wines being produced, in Tasmania and New Mexico. It's a category that has really grown, and I think, that's here to stay. Currently, orange wines, or skin contacted white wines, more properly called, technically speaking, are very popular, at least, in New York and Paris and a few other places. I don't know how popular they are, globally yet. But what's interesting there is that I sort of see a movement towards sameness right now, and conformity, where, regions and producers that weren't working in this style before suddenly are. But a lot of the wines sort of look and taste the same. They're not sort of necessarily representing these regional differences, or, traditional styles, the way, we saw when, the rosés from all over the world, or the sparkling wines from all the different regions started coming into our market. So I'm curious to see, whether orange wine will, continue to evolve in, multiple directions, and, be a category that's here to stay, that's been transformative, as you say, or, whether it's really more of a trend.
Yeah, it's interesting. You to me, you touched upon, I think, thinking of the, I guess, societal issues. You touched upon that idea of, like, diversity, of, you want the diversity in the experimentation, and that is actually the signs for you of a more robust development than kind of the narrowing in of things.
Absolutely.
Interesting. So I assume wine is a part of your life, like when you're away from the shop. But what do you do for fun when you're not at the shop, if you can even remove yourself from the shop?
Right. Well, I mean, when you have your own business, right, you never are entirely unplugged. Some part of you is always thinking about it and connected to it. You're always waiting for the phone call, or the email, or the text, or the issue that has to be dealt with. That's for sure. You never turn that off. But yes, surprisingly, despite working in wine all day, even when I'm not here, I love to drink wine, try new wines. I like to cook and eat, and share food and wine with friends, for sure. I love coffee in the morning is another passion. I often say coffee is sort of the wine of the morning. I never understand, wine people who don't also get into coffee.
Mm.
I like to run. I like, yoga. Uh, I love theater, movies, my dog.
It's a full life.
Right. I suppose I'm just a normal person in my civilian life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And how long when you were operating when you started the business? How long until you felt like you could leave and it wouldn't be an existential crisis? Obviously, you always have it on your mind, but at what point were you comfortable going out and thinking, okay, everything will be okay?
Uh, well, like I said, I'm lucky enough to have some good, capable business partners. So certainly the first year we had the store, at least one of us was always on site when it was open. Um, I definitely remember, at the end of that year, finally having a couple of employees who, we could trust to be here, one day out of the week without one of us here with them. And then, over the following few years, that became easier and easier. We had more and more staff who were, more and more trained in the operations and in had great knowledge of wine. Um, that was always sort of one of our goals in having a business, not just for the ease of operations, but just in terms of providing opportunities for people. Was we wanted to provide good jobs for people and give people who were interested in this field a chance to learn and grow. And that was always true in terms of wine and giving people wine knowledge, but also in that more sort of operational entrepreneurial side of things. Teaching people how to run the business, benefits me for my peace of mind, as you point out, that I can leave and know things are going to be okay. But it's also a benefit to them. They learn lessons that they can take and apply wherever they work next, or wherever they want to go in their career. You know, Meeting all the sort of challenges and variables of operating small business, I think serve people well wherever they go next.
Yeah. When I was in the Navy, I had two different commanding officers on the ship that I was assigned to, and one was a micromanager and one was not. He delegated and then kind of followed up, and the delegator, the one who kind of looked at his business, the ship, as something that he was dispensable to and that everybody needed to be dispensable to, I thought was a far healthier organization, because and I think there's a certain insecurity maybe for people who want to feel like they're essential to a place.
Sure.
But I think as somebody who's overseeing any kind of organization, the healthy one is the one where anybody could leave and it's going to continue to persevere.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I mean, it's also, there's certain things you can learn all about wine, on your own, or you can take a class, or, you can taste wine over and over again. But, you can only learn how to run a business by running the business. You can only learn customer service by serving the customers day in and day out, and sharing that knowledge that you maybe could have gleaned on your own. So teaching and then delegating, so people have those opportunities to put their knowledge into effect, is essential.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I feel like I could probably talk for another hour or so with you, but I think you're opening at noon, so at any second,
Right.
at least on the clock here, nobody's watching this at the time, but the real time for Ben and my conversation is almost opening time. So before I wrap up, just can I ask you, like, what gives you hope at the end of each day?
Uh-huh. Um, That's a good question. um, you know, I think our, you know, capacity for reinvention and innovation. Um, you know, I read a small, interesting article a couple days ago about, you know, robotic uh, weeding machines on farms. Uh, and, this was something that 5 years ago didn't exist. And, now is suddenly being implemented on a greater and greater scale to, solve the environmental catastrophe of pesticides and herbicides being sprayed everywhere and ending up in the oceans and the rivers and poisoning the planet. And people for years were saying, how will we ever feed the world? You can't have organics and feed the world because you have to eliminate weeds and pests. And then suddenly someone just comes along and says, oh well, we can just have a machine that can do this incredibly efficient weeding. And in 2 years will even be battery powered, so it won't even have to use fuel. It'll be carbon neutral weeding machine. And I think on a smaller scale, having lived through the last couple of years of the pandemic like everyone has, and having had to pivot and change the way the business operated one time, two times, 5 times, and who knows if there are more times to come. It's adaptability and innovation and the human capacity for that are what give me hope. I think that's our only hope to get out of all of the quagmires and challenging situations we find ourselves in the world in right now. Stasis and clinging to old ways and insularity never have solved any problems.
Yeah. Well said and very true. I think there's, and I would say it's a silver lining is a trite term, but if you look back, there's encouragement to see in how we managed to get through what could have been even more of a catastrophic experience for humanity and certainly for the country and our communities. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Ben. It's been
You're
really
welcome.
great talking with you. I wish I was still on the streets, having an excuse to stop by every week or so and share some wine with you.
Right. Well, you can still stop by. Please do.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, take care and thanks so much, and good luck with the spring
Oh, yeah.
season.
Yeah,
Thank you.
like you just did it like perfect.
Oh, sweet.